Hello everyone, Miss B here. I'm doing well and I hope that you all are doing well. If you are not, remember, work your puzzle pieces, work those puzzle pieces. I was speaking with someone recently and just some things started coming to me. Uh, and I just decided to share this. I wanted to talk about breaking the silence, being a whistleblower, telling the story or the information about your abuse, your mistreatment, your injustice, your evil, the impropriety, anything that it just falls in one of those categories. Oftentimes, holding those things will leave unnecessary and additional stress onto the person that's holding it. So eventually, you get forward, you get to a point where you speak up. And just wanted you to know that, and I'm sure most of you do by now, but just highlighting again, when you speak up against any evil, any injustice, any impropriety, any abuse, any mistreatment, there will be backlash. The backlash is always going to seek to discredit you. It's going to seek to tarnish your name and your character, and it's going to seek to directly contradict the claims that you make. And since I worked through my lived experiences, I will share a lived experience as well as some general information from what I've been compiling over the years. Maybe, let's say I'm the whistleblower, and I'm going to blow the whistle about sexual harassment. Well, blow the whistle about sexual harassment. I went on the job. And of course, we've seen it on television, we've seen it play out in the news. The person who is alleging the sexual harassment, they will be talked about. They will become the biggest slut that ever lived, that ever walked the earth. They will do whatever they can to, the persons that are being charged will do whatever they can to defame the person who's alleging the harassment. If you talk about blowing the whistle or pressing charges, if you will, on rape or abuse, before you know it, the clothing that the victim wears or has worn, the victim might even be, a Mormon and dressing very, very modestly, and they happen to be at, I don't know, a Christmas party or something, and they decide to break out of the box a little bit and wear something that's a little bit more revealing than the normal clothes. You can best bet that the people being charged, the actual abusers, will take that one incident and try to make that the entire representation of that particular victim. Innocent interactions will suddenly become sexualized. If you touch anybody in any way, oh, well, you're harassing someone else. It's like they're trying to deflect or project their behavior onto you. What about police activity? We've seen that. We live that all the time. If you're reporting any kind of police improprieties or injustices, evils, filing complaints against officers, you can expect to be harassed. I've done it. I've lodged complaints. Sometimes I wasn't harassed. Other times I was. But I've been, pulled over for alleged violations. I'm speaking one particular complaint that I lodged in the past. I had the entire state trooper team, or force, if you will, just harassing me, just follow behind me whenever they want to. I pulled over for, tail light supposedly, headlight supposedly, didn't signal, following too close, you name it, just anything that they could come up with. I think only one time I actually had a citation written, and that wound up getting thrown out. Not until after I had to go back and forth to court a couple times, but it did eventually get thrown out because the officer never showed. Um, Actually, I proceeded on up and went up the chain of command with my complaint further. And conveniently, the officer never showed, and I had to keep going back to court. First time the officer doesn't show, it seemed to me that the judge would throw it out. Nope. They kept trying to stick it. So, I say that to say, yeah, you can expect that sort of thing. If it's against a police agency in any way, your background, we know that will be checked for any improprieties. I mean, if you jaywalked when you were 3 years old by accident, well, not even by accident, because at 3 you don't know the difference, but if you ran out in the street at the age of 3, they'll try to stick a ticket on you for jaywalking here now, and you're at the age of 30. If you use the bathroom and then wash your hands, they'll try to find some way to make that illegal and stick that to you. If they can't make it illegal, then they'll use it as a character degrading flaw, if you will. Everything and anything is blown out of proportion. Your family may be targeted. Anyone that associates with you may be targeted. And those are just ways to just try to tear down your support system. Because we all know anyone that is fighting a battle, you can fight that battle if you've got support. If you have no support, it's hard to fight the battle. Because, you get worn down in the fight. And so, if they can tear down your support system, hopefully they can wear you down and get you to relinquish your right to fight. If your complaint is against a government body, any state, federal, local, any interaction with any government agency, they cross-check and share all this information. There is nothing that you can do in Alaska that Alabama won't know about, or nothing you can do in California that New York won't know about or can't find out about. So, any government interaction that you've had from the day you were born will be scrutinized. Any future government interactions, let's say you want to go get your driver's license. Well, now you know you don't have any tickets, but suddenly there's a hold on your license. You don't know why the hold is there. The lady at the desk doesn't know why the hold is there. All she knows is she sees there's a hold and it says you owe a fine of $450. You have no clue. She says, well, it's from the state of Wisconsin. Well, you say, well, I've never been to Wisconsin. Well, that's what's in the computer, so you got to call Wisconsin and get it squared away. So there starts the bureaucratic red tape, just to kind of take you through unnecessary foolishness. And yeah, you get to Wisconsin and, well, not get to, but you call them and they kind of, may take you a couple of days, track it down, come to find out you're the wrong person. So then you got to wait for them to take it off and send you notification. You can take it back to your license, DMV place, and get everything squared away. But in the meantime, how many hours have you lost? How much time have you lost? How much money have you spent? Now with cell phones, most of the long distance calls are free. But there was a time when these calls weren't free. And so when people were breaking the silence on an issue or lodging complaints or talking about various evils and injustices, they had to incur a financial cost out of pocket to fight their concerns. Like I say, any new stuff that you do with the government, it'll be needlessly confused and mixed up. Churches. Y'all know I have my thoughts about some churches, not all churches, some churches. But again, if you lodge complaints of injustices, improprieties, abuses by churches, especially church leaders, they're not any different. And one would think they are because you would expect them to be of a higher moral character, the leaders. But oftentimes, you're talked about and defamed and shamed just the same as you are from every other agency or company that you're lodging a complaint against. You'll be damaged socially. They'll do everything they can to socially damage you. In my particular case, I even had the church have postings on their social media about me. Um, but churches are good. They'll take that Bible and use it against you. You'll be labeled disobedient to God. Every scripture they can twist to apply, they will. They won't read the 3 paragraphs before and the 3 paragraphs after and realize that that one little sentence does not necessarily apply. They'll take that one sentence out of context and stick it and apply. And what they do is they'll get other members, other people to see it their way as well. And of course, at the same time, they're ignoring any scriptures that apply to their behavior. All of these companies or organizations have the tendency to, especially now in the electronic age, technology age, to use technology to make your life miserable. I think there was a movie where the particular person's identity was erased, their credit cards were shut down, just you name it, and they used the technology to do it at the click of a button. Well, guess what? That's pretty much possible. And I know because in my case, I lived it. I'm watching now, as a matter of fact. I watch hackers being paid to make life miserable, to tamper with anything they can as it relates to the accuser. Trying to, like I said, isolate you, trying to break your communications with people. So again, that's tearing down your support. Another reason for the isolation is so that no one can hear you. No one can hear your concern. No one can, your information doesn't get out there, so to speak. So you may be breaking the silence, but if the ears of everyone who are listening is somehow closed, are you really breaking the silence? No. You think you are, but you're not, because there's no one hearing you, so to speak. And so they will do all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, the ones that do hear you, they've already twisted you to be a problem child, or, oh, churches are good for demonic. Yeah, you're demonic, you've been possessed, you work in witchcraft, you voodoo, whatever they want to call it. They'll give you all of that stuff. Narcissistic and abusive parents. Something I personally experienced. When I finally spoke up, and it took me some years, but when I finally spoke up, I guess you could say publicly, about what I went through being raised in the family that I was raised in. I went through the defamation of my name and character like no other. And it weighs on you. It definitely weighs on you. I think I could have tolerated, I tolerated the defamation of character when I filed sexual harassment against one of my supervisors. It hurt. It made me mad, made me angry, all of that. But there was a difference when it came from your blood relative, from your mother. And yeah, I was named mental. You got pitting one against the other, even tried to pit my siblings against me, shaming you publicly. If I belong to a couple groups, actually, some support groups where we encourage each other. I've been doing that for some time now, even before I started these YouTubes. And, several of them talk about how their narcissistic and abusive parents, when they spoke up, even would go back to childhood and some of the things that they did wrong in their childhood, and would bring it up now in their adult life and throw it up at them and make sure the whole world knew. For example, and this is just off the top of my head, if a young girl 9 years old got caught trying to call herself having sex with a little 10-year-old little neighbor boy, And the parents, of course, kept it a secret, told them don't do it, or whatever. Well, now we're 20 years later, and, the parents are being exposed, and so they try to bring that out and say, well, see, there was always something wrong with her. She was a little hot one when she was younger. So dad could not have sexually assaulted her because she was loose anyway. She even got caught sleeping with the neighbor's boy. And so just twisting it. Now, very clearly, dad knows he ain't got no business touching that child. Well, it could be stepdad or uncle or whoever it is. But they will take that to say, that you were sexually promiscuous even at such a young age. So you led uncle on, or you seduced him when you came on to him and he was trying to back away. Um, any other deficiencies? For example, if you weren't good in school, just all around, just did not do well in school for whatever reason, probably because you were being raised by an abusive and narcissistic parent or two, but you weren't doing good in school, but you managed to get through. They'll throw that up in your face. You remember how you struggled in school and we had to help you, or we had to do this, and just anything to belittle you or to make you feel bad about opening your mouth, to make you feel bad about sharing what you lived, what you experienced. It happens in education. Teachers, when they speak up against the administrators, they get targeted. A lot of the same stuff, the intimidation, the defamation, they'll isolate them. I even had them thinking about it now. One complaint I lodged at work some years back. I remember my boss giving me a written instruction I was to speak to no one except him in the office. That was the most insane thing. But of course, the good part is that he put it in writing. So, that made for a good case to escalate on up beyond him. But yeah, they will try to isolate you. Um, some, like I said, will break laws, including hacking your stuff, anything to keep their secret, anything to not be exposed. Um, I've seen some teachers speak up against students and things the students were doing wrong or permitted to do, or the administrators didn't address that the students were doing. And those teachers get targeted, and before you know it, their schedules are changed, their classroom might be changed, they might be given extra duties, um, reports that might necessarily be due in 2 weeks, all of a sudden now due in 1 week. Just anything to make it a hostile environment, anything to make work difficult, anything to push the teacher to quit. And if the teacher doesn't quit, then what happens? They figure out a way to get rid of them. That tenure thing used to be the case, but now tenure, they'll figure out a way around tenure. If they have to set you up, if they have to, pay a hacker to put some child porn on your computer and then suddenly say, we were scanning the computer and we saw this porn and that's grounds for dismissal. And that's just an example. I don't know that actually happened, but that's just an example. Um, Again, in the workplace, it can be anything, but especially your civil rights. Bottom line, all these people want to mistreat you, and they want you to take it with a grain of salt and go on. They don't want you to speak up. If you do speak up, you will come under attack. Period. That's that. There will be the blaming. They will minimize what they did. They will hit you economically if they can. Any weakness you have, if you've got a medical issue, they will hit you with that. I remember I was in the middle of a complaint and I'd already had my Graves diagnosis by then. And there's a hot cold intolerance. And actually, at that point, I didn't know enough about my condition to realize it was affecting me. But in certain temperatures, for whatever reason, my function, my brain capacity to think and rational reason and all that other good stuff goes out the window. So it's like my brain fog kicks in. they had done enough research about my condition to know that. And so we were sitting in the office and, we're discussing and stuff. And I've got my attorney, or, yeah, it was the attorney. And we're taking notes and we're discussing possible resolutions. And I didn't realize, but one of the persons got up and went and adjusted the air. Within 10 minutes, it was freezing cold in there. And before you know it, I'm shaking so bad, cold, I can't even think anymore. So I can't even respond. I can't, conduct business appropriately. And I didn't realize it then, but it was brought to my attention afterwards. And that's when, again, so I'm starting to learn more about my condition. So I say that to say they will learn more about you than you didn't even know about yourself, because they're looking for any weakness, any flaw, any breach, any crack or crevice that they can exploit to shut down your telling your story. But what I say is, stand. If you got to the point of telling your story, don't recant your story. You have the right to speak your truth. Your story is your voice. That is your power. You're taking back your power from them every time you tell your story. Every time you share what you went through, every time you share what you're going through, what they're taking you through in the process of trying to get you justice, you gain power. You have the right to tell it. It's your story. No one can tell your story for you. No one has the right to tell your story for you. That's your right and your right only. So I say you stand on it. I just wanted to encourage those because it can get tedious when you're in the middle of a fight, especially if you're against some sort of organization, whomever it is. Uh, Oftentimes, organizations are just that, organized groups. They are organized. And so they will assign, and it's more of them against you. It might be 10, 20, 100, 500, however big your organization is. You got all of them against you, and maybe one or two supporters. But they all have 8 hours a day to sit at a round table and strategize about how to poke holes in your story, how to tear you down, how to weaken you. And then when it's all said and done, don't expect them to give you any sort of justice, any sort of severance, any sort of compensation, any of that. They're just that wicked. So, with that being said, I say again, break the silence. Tell your story. If you don't, then you wear the negative energy. You wear the stress in your body. That's a bag that you're still holding on to with the weight of it. If you tell your story, you still have the bag, but some of the weight, hopefully a lot of the weight has been taken out of that bag. And then it becomes an experience that you can be on the other side of and you can talk about without all the negative emotions attached to it. So, that was I was talking with someone and we were talking about a particular situation and just talking about how this particular group or organization was behaving so to the point of breaking laws to hide the victim's story, to isolate the victim, to defame them, to intimidate them, to break them financially, to hurt them. I mean, even to the point of tampering with their bank account. Um, and they're using hackers to do it, obviously. Electronic stuff. Um, but just making it way more than it needs to be. And that actually is going to segue into my question of why people don't just own their stuff. Just own it. One thing I learned growing up, and it might not have been the best way that I learned because I learned by abuse, but I learned when you mess up, just tell your stuff. Just admit it. Own your stuff, accept the consequence, and be done with it. And I was one of those who I think I preferred a whooping or beating or spanking, whatever you want to call it, over these long, drawn out, week-long punishments. Because for a whole week, I can't go outside and play. No. Here, get the belt, whoop me real quick. Let me get my whooping over and be done with it. But I say that to say, people got to start owning their stuff. And the only way they're going to be forced to own their stuff is if we continue to break the silence, if we continue to call out all the evil, the atrocities, the injustices, the improprieties, the the foolishness, the abuse, the harassment, all this crooked stuff that they're doing. Call it out, put it out there, and keep putting it out there, and keep putting it out there. Eventually, they're going to have to come clean. They're going to have to own their stuff. Some people it takes a week, some a month, some a year, some 10 years. I know someone took 17 years before they actually owned their stuff. Now, they created a whole bunch of havoc in the lives of a lot of people along, in those 17 years. But it took them 17 years to finally, and they didn't really totally own it. They owned doing wrong, and they said, I'm sorry, and it was kind of a half-ass apology. But they did own it. And that was something that the person who was sharing that experience with me, I could hear in their voice the impact that it made on them when the person owned their stuff, how they felt a relief of sorts. And they had learned to live with the circumstance, but it was always kind of, I guess, in the back of their mind somewhere or something. And so she was talking about it, and she said, the person had addressed her and apologized for what they'd done. And I could just hear the relief in her. So I say that to say, if you've got some silence to break, if you've got some stuff to talk about, you put it out there and you stand on it and you speak your truth. You regain your voice, regain your power. That's your story. Whether they own it today, tomorrow, next year, or the day they're closing their eyes. Because truth be told, especially if they so-called Christians, no matter whether they're on extreme to one end or the other, they all want to repent just before they die. Well, they're going to own their stuff at some point. So, that being the case, just think about that. Just think about that. And those of us who are watching people go through stuff, we're watching them stand up against injustices and evils and improprieties and abuses and harassments. Stand with them. Stand with them because they need your support. Even if it's just we're in the age of technology. Even if it's just a text that's saying, hey, how you doing? Miss you, love you. Or keep up the good work if y'all are not close enough to say those words. Or stay encouraged, or praying for you, whatever term you want to use, just to give them a little bit of encouragement because they need it. It's very rough. These fights against these people are something. And I'm going to say this last and I'm going to go. And I know I usually don't quote scripture, but in the Bible, it's something that came to me actually a couple of days ago. The chapter 6 in Ephesians talks about we wrestle not against people. We're not fighting real people. We're fighting spirits. We're fighting demons, principalities, rulers, wickedness in high places. Well, I thought about it and I said to myself, well, if that's the case, and if you're sitting in a church and you're a layman and your leader, your pastor is in a high place compared to where you sit physically because he stands up higher than you, and then socially because he has a higher ranking. Could he be that wickedness, that principality in high places that you fight against? If you're fighting against, I don't know, the chief of police, he's definitely in a higher place than you are. So when we think of that scripture, don't necessarily think of demons and stuff like that. These people that you're looking at every day, they could very well be the representation of that. Don't cut them any slack. So, as who was it? Somebody sang, Corey Hart, I believe it was, sang the song, about 30, 40 years ago. They said, never surrender, never surrender. You stand on it. That being the case, I'm out.